My career in comics began when I was 3 years old, when my mother tells me I learned to read from the comic books when I was 3. I then prepared an enormous collection because I bought every comic book in sight. And if I couldn't find it in the newsstands, I'd find them at a flea market near us. And back when I was a kid, nobody knew old comic books were valuable. So I would find old comics from the 30s, 40s, and 50s and buy them for a nickel a piece. And eventually I amassed a collection of over 50,000 comic books dating back to 1936. And my dad never got his car into the garage even one day. But I had just walls filled with comic books, floors filled with comic books, and in fact became a member of the early comic book fandom and attended the first comic book convention ever held, July 1964, in a Fleabag Hotel in New York City. There were 200 of us there. And my mother and father were appalled because we had to step over drunks in the hallway in order to check in. But that's how far back I go. The key for me came when I was an undergrad at Indiana University in Bloomington, and I began teaching the world's first accredited college course on comic books. I was a comic book professor when I was an undergrad. And that course got a lot of attention. It was written up by newspapers, magazines. I was doing TV and radio interviews, and it came to the attention of two interesting people: Stan Lee at Marvel Comics in New York, and Sol Harrison, vice president of DC Comics in New York. And one thing led to another, and Mr. Harrison said, "I like what you're doing. It's great for the whole comic book industry. We're going to fly you to New York." And bingo, I wound up working for DC Comics. And from there, I became the writer of The Shadow, and then I got a crack at a dream I had since I was 8 years old, which was to write Batman comics. And wow, that was amazing. The day my first Batman comic was published, I said, I don't have a dream anymore. I got to have a new dream. And within 10 minutes, it was, I want to make the definitive, dark, serious Batman movie. Batman as a creature of the night stalking criminals from the shadows. And that became my mission. Little did I know it would take me over 10 years from the time I acquired the rights to Batman to get it on the silver screen, because I was turned down by every single studio in Hollywood. I was told I was insane. Nobody could ever do a dark, serious comic book character, a dark, serious superhero. It was impossible. And so my impossible dream became my journey in life. It was more apt to be described as a human endurance contest. And but since I was a kid, I always believed that comic books were an indigenous American art form that we should be proud of. As indigenous to this country as jazz, and that the artists and the writers, the creators since the 1930s needed to be recognized for what they had contributed to the American culture, to the world culture. And as a result, over the past few years, I've had a chance to speak twice at the Smithsonian Institution, launch a comic book exhibit at Indiana University's Lilly Library, and Montclair, New Jersey's Montclair Art Museum. And the culmination is there are right now comic books hanging up on the wall of the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art. And let me tell you something, it doesn't get any better than that. And it celebrates and it validates and it honors everybody that ever worked in the comic book industry. And I'm very, very proud to be here today and part of this. Of course, Batman was my favorite superhero of all time, because he had no superpowers I could identify with him more than Superman or Spider-Man. In fact, Batman's greatest superpower is his humanity. Probably when I was 8 years old, I believed that if I studied really, really hard and worked out real hard, and if I could get my dad to buy me a cool car, I could be that guy. And that began my dedication over a lifetime to Batman.
So you've been instrumental in bringing so many comic book stories to the silver screen. Do you have a favorite movie interpretation?
Yeah, to me, the bookends of everything I ever wanted to see done in movies has been the first Batman movie by Tim Burton, and the last two Batman movies, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight by Chris Nolan. How rare to be able to work with two people who are absolute geniuses and who get it. And Chris Nolan so gets it and understands everything. It's just been great and very exciting. Coming up Christmas Day, I'm producer of The Spirit, which is written and directed by Frank Miller, and it's an amazing piece of work. I'm very, very proud of that.
For new comic book readers, what's coming out brand new right now that you think is really exciting in comics?
I think one of the most exciting things in comics today are manga, coming out of Japan, cutting edge. Kids are into it, girls are into it. Comic books have never quite catered to girls so much in the last few years, and manga does. And they are doing some fascinating, fascinating things. And I think that we're coming to a day when the nostalgia we have right now for people who grew up with Spider-Man, Superman, and Batman and are taking their kids to see the movies and share the experience, another generation or so, they're going to be taking their kids to see manga and anime movies.